Do we want to do some introductions?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Pbis in Action, talking about a student summit, featuring student voice. So with you today, you have consultants from IUs 8, 10, and 11. I'm Brad Faze on the Behavior Initiative with IU 8. I'll let everybody introduce themselves.
I'm Megan Horsch. I'm from IU 8, TAC as well.
I'm Dawn Moss from IU 10, and I work with Christine Zanker, who's also on this team.
Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Gordon Hall. I am a IU consultant with TIU 11, the T in ACT, and I work with Julie Brown.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Brown, and I am an educational consultant for IU 11, and I provide support to our districts in the area of behavior. So welcome to our session.
Yes, thank you. So as you can see here on the map, you can see that IU 8, 10, and 11, we're all located in the central region. We've been working together for many years on different initiatives. So that's why we started this Pbis Student Summit. So going back and seeing where we started, the purpose, where we started. So our goal was really to strengthen teams within our network and our region. We were working together on a lot of different initiatives, and we started originally with adults only sessions. We had coaches sessions, so we'd bring all the coaches from around the region together to provide some networking opportunities. We had admin networking sessions that we brought individuals, but we really didn't have student sessions around. So looking at that, we said our student teams in our high schools were really picking up, and we realized student voice was essential for that to sustain in those areas. So we wanted to figure out something to bring individuals together. And around that time, originally Dawn Moss had the idea. She's like, I want to bring some students together, but we just don't have enough teams in our region. So since we were doing things jointly together, we decided that we'll try to bring all the student teams from around the areas in IU 8, 10, and 11 together. So then around 2016, that's when we started to put this together, because we realized that secondary implementation can be really challenging if you don't have student buy-in. So we figured out that, that student network, that really helps build that capacity. And we wanted to make it around them. So we just talked about this, making sure we spoke their language, having things at their level. So we tried to get technology in there. We wanted it student driven. We didn't want it driven by adults. So we wanted to make sure that we had interactive sessions with kids presenting and leading that way for everyone. So we created a structured network there. So why we started, like I said, that purpose, that vision around that secondary is, we want to make sure that these kids, it's their school. We want to make sure we hear their voice. We want them to be involved, to lead that change. So we figured that buy-in from them, if we can get them networking together and really excited about that, they take that back to their school, that it will really strengthen the teams, not only within that student area, but the adults team, if they see that passion around what they're doing. The first year, it was a little bit crazy. The planning was really intentional. It was a lot. And on here today, we have Dr. Erica Kaurudar. She was also a part of that back in the day. So Erica was our structure person. She was the one that we really needed to put the structure. Dawn sort of had a vision. Erica had that structure. So like the planning, you can see, we met several times. You can see the team there from the original student summit. An organization was key because we didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, we had no idea how many people were going to be there, what was going to happen. We knew that there was going to be a lot of moving parts when we were working on this, because we're going to be working with kids. So, so what we did was we met several times. We sent out surveys to kind of get an idea of what they wanted, what topics they were looking for. And we brought that back as we're making our planning sessions. We figured we needed to make it centrally located. We have such a large area that it could be several hours from north to south or east to west. So we tried to make it centrally located. So we looked at different regions and we figured around the State College area might be the best area for us at that time, that actually had a facility that was, you know, that we were able to afford, you know, for the rent and everything and the food services. So we figured we got the Good Shepherd Church up there. So we had all the sessions planned and prep ready to go. As you can see, the act, which you're going to see here in a little bit, we had expectations defined, taught, and acknowledged throughout, just like we do in our school settings. You know, in training sessions, we also had that ready to go. We had expectations ready to go for the kids. We reviewed them at the beginning. Like I said, we posted them around the region. We had an acknowledgement system set up and ready to go. And we had not only that, we realized that the adults had to come with them. So we had student or the student team leads, some of the coaches, some of the student team leaders. So we had some adult sessions prepped and ready to go so that they could network while the students were there. So the adults weren't actually in the sessions with the students. We had separate sessions ready to go for adults. So that way they could network and talk about what was going on in their schools. There are some pictures of the student facilitated sessions. And you see the kids, you know, we try to make it relaxing, enjoyable, fun. You can see that we had notes prepped and ready to go, that they could take notes and not have questions ready. All right, this was at the end. So I said that we had an acknowledgement system. So we had a wheel, we had numbers ready to go, and we had tickets. So, you know, we'd spin the wheel and pull out prizes. So we had a bunch of prizes for the kids. They really liked this at the end. It was pretty fun. So, all right, I believe we're jumping into the next section. Let Julie, I'm gonna stop the share.
That's me.
Yeah.
All right.
And you're gonna see, sorry, you're gonna see going on some more pictures, some of our act, like I said, our prize system. You're gonna see our planning documents coming up here that we worked on. Those were at the beginning. We haven't started right at the beginning because that organization was key. And like I said, we can't take all the props for that. That was Dr. Kaurudar, because she's highly organized and structured.
Okay. Thanks, Brad. All right. The first thing I would like to share with everyone would be the link to the resource folder that is on the Padlet. Under your secondary strand, you will see our PDF of the PowerPoint. And then right underneath that, you will have access to these resources that, that we have shared. These resources start back in 2017 and continue throughout the current year of putting on the Student Summit. I will be referring to some of these resources as I move throughout the next portion of the presentation. Okay. Right, so. Back into the PowerPoint and we will be ready to go.
Does anyone have any questions so far? If someone's talking, we can't see that.
Okay. Right. Whoops. Okay. So if one of my colleagues will be so kind as to keep an eye on the chat box for me as we go throughout this next section. So Brad highlighted the first 2 years of the Student Summit, and that was held in a central location in State College area. As data was collected with our numbers of student teams attending the Student Summit and the number of adults attending as well, it was determined that perhaps a larger location was needed. So the team did some research, some digging around, and came up with a few ideas. we determined that a new location would be needed. And it just so happened that Juniata College is located right here in Huntington County. And the college has a fall break. So we were able to coordinate with Juniata College during their fall break to hold the Student Summit. What that allowed for us as to have the Student Summit at that location. It was a large location. Students from middle school through high school were able to attend on a college campus and have that college campus feel of moving from classroom to classroom, gathering in a larger auditorium, and then even walking around campus and going to the cafeteria, which was a highlight we will get to in a few minutes. The president of Juniata College was thrilled to be able to take part in the Student Summit. He addressed the students at the beginning of the summit and welcomed them to the campus and acknowledged their leadership within their schools across our IU regions that were attending. When it was all said and done, we had over 360 participants, and that includes students and adults attending the Student Summit. So as you can imagine, that took an awful lot of coordination and planning to accommodate over 282 students to make sure those students had access to student-led sessions, to make sure they understood the layout of the building that they were going to, as well as ensure that we had acknowledgements in place for the students attending.
Julie, we had a question in the chat.
Sure.
And the question was, how did we recruit students? And everything we did through our already existing PBIS teams. So we contacted all the middle school and high school PBIS coaches. Some of them did have teams already, some of them did not, but we invited them to this opportunity, and it really helped to establish teams in some schools and to really strengthen teams in others.
Absolutely. And that was a great question. At the end of each Student Summit, evaluations were distributed for not only the adults, but for the student teams as well. And prior to planning taking place, the consultants would talk with one another and really have discussions surrounding, we have a strong student team in this particular school. They're great with recruiting donations for acknowledgements. So oftentimes we would begin our discussions based upon our conversations that we've had and just with our working with our student teams and PBIS teams within the middle school and secondary levels. Right, which brings me to the next point. We would plan our student sessions based upon the topics that we were seeing coming up through our attendance at our monthly meetings, as well as our interactions with our PBIS teams in the schools. I had mentioned that oftentimes through conversation, we would highlight strong student teams and things that were going really well within schools. We would also talk about obstacles that would arise and how student teams would help with overcoming those obstacles. So once we determined the topics or areas of interest that were indicated, that's when we will begin our laying the groundwork for reaching out to the coaches and to the students' teams to see if they would be interested in presenting a session. The session was about 40 to 45 minutes, and student teams could prepare those sessions independent of their coaches, but their coaches would also be able to help them if needed. In a couple minutes, you're going to see some of the planning documents, as well as some of the snapshots from our student-led sessions. So you can imagine that as we were planning, as from the IU perspective, we knew this was going to be a large undertaking for coordination, for ensuring support would be available for everyone, and making sure student teams were where they needed to be and students attending knew where to go. So that's where our patent colleagues were asked to provide support. And we had participation from numerous patent consultants, and they were so gracious to come on site to Juniata College. The AEDY team provided support. That particular year, Chris Cherney and Angela Kirby were present as well. I know Shonda and Drew were attending and provided their facilitation abilities for student-led sessions. In addition, although I use 8, 10, and 11 planned and coordinated the Student Summit at Juniata College, we did have some additional IU support from our colleagues, Michael Lord, Kelly Swartwood, Irene Reedy, and Wendy Williams. And if I missed any, I do apologize. But those consultants were interested in leading a student summit in their area too. So they wanted some experience as well as just to understand the inner workings of what was going on here with this collaboration. In order for us to ensure that the day went smoothly from start to finish, we prepared and shared key information of the day's happenings with the coaches before anyone even stepped onto the Juniata College campus. That information helped with preparing for the student-led sessions. It included the lunch choices, as well as we reached out for donations and sponsors in order to provide acknowledgements for our students who were attending. Right, so I'm going to pause here. If there are any questions, I see there are a couple chats. Okay, and now I'm going to show you some of the documents, some of the planning documents that we utilized in order to ensure success with the Student Summit. All right, so I mentioned planning quite a few times. As you know, a student summit of this size definitely entailed a lot of planning as well as organization. So this is a sample of the planning document of what the tasks were, who was responsible for completing the task, by what date, and then any additional notes were added as far as what else needed to go along with the task completion. This particular document is housed in that resource folder, so you can certainly access this document to see some of the things, the big ideas that we planned around. All right. I mentioned that key information was shared with the coaches before anyone even came on to the Juniata College campus. This document is also housed in the resource folder. This goes through the agenda for the day, what will occur at what time, as well as then on included in this document would be the session listings. When you pull that up in the resource folder, you're going to see the student-led sessions. Some of the sessions included overcoming obstacles, student success stories, assemblies and events to support PBIS, incentives and acknowledgements, and even expansion of student teams. Within our student-led sessions, we ask our coaches and student teams to let us know, would this be a session best for middle school students or high school students, or would it be a session where middle school and high school students could attend? That way, students knew which session would be the most valuable to them. All right, here is an example. And once again, this is in your resource folder of the student sessions that were provided, as well as the student teams who planned who planned the session. And you can see how this was organized, and as well as the adult facilitators that were present within the session.
Every year that we had our conference, we had a document just like this. So every year we had these same documents. And you can see that there are adults assigned to that, but notice like on the first one where it says Chestnut Ridge High School, we might have welcomed everyone, and then those adults step right to the back of the room and the high school took right over. We actually were just there to run errands if they needed something.
That's right. Yes. And help with additional seating if needed.
Mhm.
All right. So we, as consultants, familiar with planning training sessions, we knew that our student teams needed to have some sort of guidance before presenting in front of their in front of other student teams. And so what we would do, we would provide some preparation guidelines about the presentation and key tips for the facilitators prior to the student teams coming and presenting. We wanted our student teams to have as much support as needed and to feel as confident in front of their peers as possible. So once again, this is provided in your resource folder as well. Oops, and there is a second page, sorry about that. So you can see some examples of the questions we included and some of the tips for planning that our student teams could use as guiding forces. We also wanted our adult facilitators in the room to, if conversation lacked or if the conversation wasn't moving along, we wanted to provide some guiding questions for the facilitators to ask if needed. And from my experience within the student sessions, the conversation and the questions continued right up until the end of the session. So students attending, they came prepared with questions. They came prepared to share some of the success at their story or their schools as well. And really, we never lacked for any type of engagement or participation within any of the sessions.
Yeah, on the page prior, you could see that we asked schools to prepare something for like 15, 20 minutes and then allow the other schools that were there to share what they were doing. So it was really to get everyone involved. It wasn't just the presentation.
All right, we've included some scenes from Juniata College. Judd Pittman was the keynote speaker for the Student Summit in 2019, and he is interacting there, having a good time with the president of Juniata College. You can see the lobby of Brumbaugh Hall, I believe. That was set up with our acknowledgements, our check-in, our any agendas that were needed for the day. So these are all organizational pieces that we had planned out and prepped beforehand.
And one thing that we didn't know is Judd was a graduate of Juniata College. So that's where he had received his bachelor's. So that was kind of fun for him. You could see there that the Juniata College table, they gave us, I can't even remember what discounted rate we had for that day. I don't know if it was maybe $100 for technology support, and then we did pay for the food, but they asked us if they could put up a table and we were happy to accommodate that. That wasn't like a requirement on their part, but they were so awesome to work with. We wanted to do whatever we could to acknowledge that.
Right. And I just looked at the invoice for this day, and we were charged, the invoice was all for the food, and they allowed us to use the facilities for free and a slight charge for technology. So Juniata College was certainly very generous with hosting the Student Summit and allowing us to come into their space and for this collaboration. Here are the student sessions, and you can tell from the pictures that there are a wide variety of students attending, and starting in middle school all the way up to senior high school. Some pictures of our student team who presented that day. And you can see we even had middle school teams presenting, as well as more seasoned or experienced high school teams presenting. Here are the sessions in action. Some of our student teams came with a PowerPoint or some Google slides to share, which was absolutely fine. And some of our student teams came and just had their notes with them and talked through their session presentation. Either platform, either way was absolutely acceptable. Here are some scenes from around campus. I had mentioned the students going to the cafeteria. That was a huge hit for the students. The cafeteria on the Juniata College campus was set up with various food stations where students were able to go in and have their lunch, pick their lunch choice, and really experience that aspect of a campus or college life. We were able to walk around campus from the Broomball building down to Ellis Hall, where lunch was set up for the students. And I know, I think it was Brad that had mentioned the coordinator of facilities came up to Brad during the day and said how respectable and how just responsible the students attending this student summit were, and just what a positive message they sent to everyone there on the Juniata College campus.
Yeah, absolutely. They said that, like they said they were actually more well-behaved than the college students there. They were pretty impressed with the way the students, I mean, we had 282 students, the way they were, networking within that facility.
Okay, and then to wrap up the day after our afternoon sessions, we did have student acknowledgements. And I'll go back into the resource folder to show you what was shared beforehand. Tickets were shared with coaches before students arrived right on campus. And so when students were exhibiting and showing the behavioral expectations, they were given a ticket, and then from there, they were able to place their tickets in the prize bag that they wanted. And at the end of the day, we had quite the acknowledgement system going on. We had lots of prizes going out to the student body, and that was certainly a highlight. And I have to say, the barbecue Middlesworth chips were like a hot commodity that day.
Yeah,
Yes.
Michael Lord had contacted Middlesworth and they had donated chips, and kids were excited for the trip home with their bag of chips.
Yes. Okay. All right. And here is, this was the example of the ticket that was shared prior with the coaches prior to the students coming on campus. And there were, of course, lots of extras to hand out. We wanted all students to have at least one acknowledgement by the end of the student summit. Okay, let's go out to, let me stop share, and then I can go out to the resource folder.
While you're doing that, Julie, do you mind if I share a quick anecdote as someone who was a PBIS coach at the time?
Yeah, you go right ahead, Gordon.
So I'm only going to have 3 slides in this presentation because I was not there at the inception, and 3 slides is reflective of my contribution to building the Student Summit. But I was a district PBIS coach when the Student Summit was being put on by our IU. And our junior high had just launched a team. And in the planning process, the adults in the school were like, we're not going to adopt a ticketing system because that's really for younger kids. And our junior high students are going to think that's not really exciting. They're not going to get invested in that. So then they formed a student team, and the student team went to the student summit, and they heard from other student teams that there were ticketing systems that were connected to acknowledgements. And they came back and actually advocated to their school, this is something that we think would be so exciting. And the adults responded by adopting this practice, and this actually moved them into a point at which they are now a team that consistently meets fidelity of implementation year over year. So it's just a success story that kind of grew out of the power of student voice.
Thank you, Gordon. All right. So here, once again, the resources are located on the Padlet that was shared out at the beginning of today. And please feel free to access these on your own time as well. If you're interested in hosting a student summit, some of these documents are really going to help with your planning and organization. So let me pull up one I wanted to share with everyone. We provided a note-taking page for the student teams and all the students attending, just so they had some organization already in place to help them remember some key features that they liked, or even to take ideas back to their own PBIS team. So that was shared with all students. Oops. I apologize. Okay. Here would be some additional. This is just a session breakdown. Here would be session number 12. This is what was shared with the student teams. And then this is a complete organizational document for that team presenting some of the guiding questions and tips for facilitators as well.
As you can see, we were very well organized, and we continue to improve upon that. But we felt we didn't want, this was new to students. This is new to a middle school student to go to a conference and to present. So we wanted to provide those structures for success.
Here is an example of one of the other breakout sessions that was included. So this goes through the guiding questions for student facilitators, as well as, that it's okay for for additional questions to be asked. So these were all intentionally planned and then shared with our student teams in order for them to experience success and feel confident in front of their peers. And I'll share one more. Here would be the copy of the student tickets that were shared out. In order for, these were all shared prior to the students coming. They were shared with the coaches so coaches were encouraged, all adults were encouraged to acknowledge appropriate student behavior throughout the entire student summit.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so when the adults, like Julie said, when the adults signed in for the day, they received tickets to give out in the sessions. It was a great energy to see the kids interacting. Maybe at first they stayed in their groups, and then we really wanted to make sure that they were able to get to different sessions. So they started to feel comfortable going to other sessions and didn't have to have a school partner with them. But is this my part here, Julie? I'll go in over the
displays, right?
Student displays. All right.
Okay.
Can you go to the next one? So we knew this was actually our first year. We knew we wanted to mirror the advantages that we had as PBIS facilitators and coaches when we attend conferences and sessions. And so we wanted to mirror that. So we had schools, we had a poster session every single year. We would have opportunities. A school did not have to do this if they didn't want, but we had an area where posters were up and students stood by their poster and were able to give input as people came around to visit. There's another example of that. It's really awesome. Yeah. It was very exciting to see the pride in the students, and they felt good about what they were doing. But we made it real also in the fact, the one thing I admire about our PBIS network is we're not afraid to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And our student teams did the same. They shared their struggles. They shared what they had tried and that hadn't worked. And so I really admired that they, just like the adults in our PBIS network, share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we can all learn from that. Yeah.
I think, yep.
So
Those
is
were
that
some of the most recent,
Oh.
yes,
yes?
at Juniata College. So
Yeah, awesome. Does anybody have any questions so far? You're a very quiet group. So this is just showing our first year was 2017. And you can see there how many students and faculty we had. We were in a church in State College. That was great to work with. We actually provided our own lunch. We ordered pizza, had salad, brought in cookies. So we were very on hands. That was a lot of work to provide food for 250 people, but we kept those costs. I believe, I'm trying to remember the cost of those. I think our total cost in year 2017, 2018, we were about $2,000. So all three IUs split that. We didn't split hairs over how many kids you had, how many we had. We just did a three-way split on that. And I think those years it ran about $2,000. And most of that we had to rent the facility and then our food. And then as you can see, we had our totals for 2018. Again, we were in State College for that conference. And then then 2019 is when we transitioned to Juniata.
Yeah, and you look, we had what, 223 kids the first year, and we were thinking, boy, if we get about 75, that'll be a good day. And they just kept coming and coming and coming, you know. And I believe the next year we told every team, we gave them kind of a limit because some people were trying to bring like 15 plus, and we said, hey, we can't support 300-400 at this location. So we gave them a limit just because of the size of the venue.
Yes. And we never charge. None of our schools have paid for anything but transportation. Our special ed directors at each of our IUs have found money to pay for this, even the one at Juniata College, which was more than obviously us putting it on ourselves. And so there is no cost to this. So we were very lucky that our administrators supported this project.
So we do have a question in the chat about special ed students,
Yes.
you know, and especially with ES support programs. We never took demographic information from our students. So I couldn't tell you, you know, what the background was from the students. I don't know if you could speak to that, but anytime that we do you know, work with student teams, we always ask them to, you know, take a broad example of you know, the population of your students. So if you have kids with special ed, you have gifted students, you have kids in a band, you have kids in all, we always ask for that broad representation. So I'm not sure. I don't want to answer that.
Yeah, you're right. We don't know that.
So,
And Dawn, did you want to speak to this? I highlighted it at the very beginning of the number for the 2019 totals. We increased our numbers, and we had, you know, more student representation coming from even, you know, more within each IU as well, more student teams coming from each IU.
I think one of our biggest challenges has, as you saw that first slide with the map and how big our region is, our biggest challenge was finding a central location for all schools. And maybe your regions, like we know we're some of the largest geographic regions in the IU, so maybe yours wouldn't be as challenging, but I think that was probably one of our biggest challenges. And then, oh yes, we did have a release for photography. Yep, all kids had a release that they signed, or parents signed before they came. And the insurance, I do not know.
I can't remember with the Good Shepherd. I don't know if we did, but I'm pretty sure Juniata required proof of insurance, which we have liability insurance through our IUs, I believe.
Yes.
Right. And I think we might have used the releases that the kids had in their schools. So, and I do not know if any other regions are doing summits. I would think that maybe Patton could answer that question. So this will have, I'll obviously be happy to take more questions, but this leads us to, so we had these great 2 years in State College. We went to Juniata College. We were on a high for our student summit, and how great it was for everyone involved. Let me tell you, even the adults were excited about the cafeteria, not just those kids. And so then we go from that, we're on a real high, we're ready to go our next year, and I'll hand it over to Megan.
I'll actually step in.
Oh, Gordon.
Yeah, so yeah, Dawn's setting me up to be the one to, let's all reflect on what happened in March of 2020. Let's see what happened back then. So I actually did take a position in the academic year 1920. I applied to work for IU 11, and then I became a consultant in 2020. Yay! And now we had to take this whole process that we had set up, and we had to figure out, how can we connect students to one another in a virtual environment? And like everyone else who went through this process, it was a bumpy ride trying to figure out what is gonna get us to be able to connect kids in a period of time where we all have to remain isolated. I mean, we are trying to share ideas and bring people together at a time where we're being told to socially distance. So some of the things that we had to think through were the virtual platforms, and like everyone else, Zoom kind of became the thing that everybody used. And we can actually move on to the next slide here. But we approached everything in the same way, being just like we were when we were in traditional settings. We were being intentional with planning things out. And so one of the outcomes of the pandemic was that we had to push what had been the fall student summit into the spring of 2021, so that we could be more intentional about what we were doing in adopting a student summit or adapting a student summit to the virtual environment. And the other piece, one of the first things that we knew we wanted to make sure we were addressing was the fact that we were going to need to shorten everything up. We as people presenting, we as people who were attending multiple sessions knew that Zoom fatigue could be extremely wearying, that the ability to attend information when you're not in a room and able to read body language and able to listen to people's tone of voice as well when it's coming through a screen, we knew that we wanted those sessions to be much shorter. So taking a full day and truncating that down to maybe a morning, a couple hours, taking hour-long sessions and moving them to 15 minutes. And in general, making sure that we were moving students through information at a rate that's going to keep them engaged and not allowing the session to spiral to a point where they raise the white flag like this person here in the image. Okay, and then on our next slide, the other piece to this that goes along with just in general good PBIS practices is continuing to have systems of acknowledgements and rewards and engagement. So how can we be engaging? So there, if you're paying very close attention to the pictures, you would have seen that we had a physical wheel for prizes that was spun in the traditional setting, and now we can use, I believe it's Circle of Names. Someone's going to correct me on that. I'm getting nodding heads. Circleofnames.com.
Wheel of Names.
Wheel of Names. Thank you. So Wheel of Names, if you want to use that one, is a virtual spinner that you can just put in names to provide prizes. Is there someone out there who's familiar with maybe this image who would know what this is? Kahoot, Faye McMillan, you get 1,000 points. Congratulations to you. Yes, that is a Kahoot. So Kahoot would be an online quiz platform that provides points, that is free and simple to use, taking feedback from students, just in general, and continuing with the same processes that were successful in a traditional setting, but trying to find ways to adapt them. And so including that engagement piece. And that we'll change slides and I'll turn it over to Megan.
Again, keeping in what was traditional, we wanted to teach our webinar expectations. And so we were intentional about putting them as our backgrounds throughout the session when it moved virtual. We wanted to link those to reinforcements. One of the things that happened in our first virtual session was we talked about how we were going to get these incentives to the students, right? When we're all there in person and we're spinning a wheel, we can call that person up, give them their reward, everybody claps. But in a virtual session, how do we be intentional about that? And what we ended up doing was each IU had a breakout room at the end where we did our spinning wheel so that we could deliver those incentives to our local schools without having to cross boundaries or borders. And so we made that switch, and we also switched to reinforcing our webinar expectations as part of that. Again, to kind of build on what Dawn was saying, giving you both the positives and things we've learned. That was one thing I think we could have done better on, linking that reward at the end to those webinar expectations. What we did was, if we were in the breakout rooms and we saw students participating, being responsible, respectful, we would enter their name in the wheel an extra time at the end. If we had to do it virtually again, hopefully we're back to face-to-face in the fall, but I think that would be maybe a more intentional Google ticket system or something like that we might utilize to make that connections. But again, the positive, we continued those expectations, we continued reviewing them, linking them to reinforcements, maybe just needed to be a little bit more intentional about it. The other shift we made when we went to the virtual world had to do with the facilitation. And this is kind of where we lost vision a little bit of what our intention was originally. When we first moved to a virtual session, our thought was, let's take some of the responsibility and pressure off the students, and let's facilitate those sessions as adults. That way they don't have to be prepared. They don't have to be experts in presenting in Zoom. Let's go ahead and have the adults do that. We came up with guiding questions. And what we found was that first virtual year where we facilitated, there was not nearly as much buy-in. There wasn't nearly as much discussion. And again, it moved away from our original vision. And so the second year we did virtual, the second time we did virtual, we went back to having students really participate. They presented, they came up with the topics. And by that point, they were comfortable in virtual settings. And so you could really see the uptick of participation in those breakout rooms and those discussions once we went back to our original vision and let the students really lead this and took ourselves out of it. And you can see our numbers there. There was a dip, as you can anticipate, that first year, which was the spring of 21. We had 60 students. We held it again this fall. Virtually, we had over 100 students. The other thing I do want to delineate as well is when we were doing face-to-face student summit, the coaches and adults traveled with their students. And so while they were there, we did a coaches session and adult sessions for them to discuss. In a virtual session, we kind of pulled those two apart. So when we held our student summit, it was really geared just to students. And then we had our coaches sessions throughout the year instead of having them both on the same day, since we know it's hard these day and age to get subs and coverage. So our totals for our virtual summits just include the students, because we did pull those coaches components into just our sessions every 6 to 8 weeks. And so the next couple slides just kind of reiterate, and I want to be respectful of time and give time for questions here. Go ahead, Dawn. I think you.
This is just a couple pictures. You see our group here. This was our second year, I believe. We all had t-shirts. Julie wore her t-shirt today, and I forgot to. If anybody has anything to add to that, it was nice. Our supervisors from the IU came to join us in those years. So it was, you know, they were paying the bill. So it was nice for them to see the benefit of where that money was going. Right, here's some more pictures from Juniata. This is where we were handing out surprises. You know, we use music. We love using music. That really helps. Nicole Holland Sims did a keynote. She was our first year. A keynote was a coach from one of our local high schools. Our second year, Nicole Holland Sims was a keynote, and then Judd Pittman was a keynote. The importance of getting feedback. We surveyed afterwards our adults and our students. Just some of their comments. I just wanted to add one more thing. We continue, not just the student summit, but we continue as a ACT group, the 3 IUs, we continue to work together. This year, we are hosting monthly PBIS networking coaches meetings, and it's school climate / PBIS networking. And that happens monthly. We've covered tier 2 topics, trauma. We're going to be doing restorative practices. And then also we collaborate on the school psychologist networking. We have been doing that. We do a lot on the academic side also, but we're just acknowledging what we do on our behavior side. It's really nice to work together. The thing that I find is people have great skill sets that I don't have. And so I love being able to network with my fellow facilitators. Do you have any questions? I saw in the chat, Catherine was saying that they're going to be working on a network student summit in the West. That'll be awesome. She joined us, I think, year one. I think Catherine drove over from Pittsburgh and joined us for our first summit. I guess if there's no questions, we provided a lot of information, and so someone's asking about a student summit on the East. You know, this is an opportunity for you to start thinking about, you know, we initiated this on our own. The fact that Patton came to support us was a benefit and a side, but they were not in charge of any of the planning. We initiated things ourselves. This was something that was done by our IUs. And I know that you probably also have regional IU groups that you work in. And if you don't work as closely as we typically do, now's a great time to start. Is our monthly networking open to others? Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. I would think you would be welcome. You would need to email. I don't know if we even put our contact information on here. And then there was another question I thought I could answer. So what we're doing is at one of our monthly networking meetings in February, we're going to be talking about restorative practices and how it aligns. It's not a separate networking. Oh, Christine, thank you. Christine's kind of spearheading our ACT school climate PBIS networking, and she put in the chat the invitation. And what we do is we have that networking meeting and we record it. And then those who signed up for that session get a copy of the PowerPoint and the recording. But that does not go out to everyone at large, only if you registered. So whether you attended or didn't attend, but you registered, you get that. So it looks like there's an open invitation there to our networking. Oh, yeah. Talking about the student summit, I have to tell you one last thing. The first year we had this, our coaches were laughing because they were coming to us saying the kids wanted to have, they wanted us to plan another one and it to have include an all-night volleyball tournament. And so they really enjoyed being together, and it was nice to see. Erica, do you have anything to add since you were there in that initiation group?
Just one of my very, very favorite events, a very nice way to connect students and really get authentic student voice in your PBIS. I always like the quote from Rob Horner. It's not something we do to students, it's something we should do with students. And that's kind of at the heart of it. I'm going to stop recording now because we have to get to other sessions.
All right.